Hello, fabulous friends, fans, and superstars. Welcome to the Venus Retrograde Season Special Horoscope going from September 3rd, 2018, right to December 18, 2018. I am your astrologer, Nadiya Shah. Thank you for being here. Well, there are few years like this and few seasons like this. It's kind of like the year of retrogrades. We've had powerful retrogrades back to back, mainly Mars that is still in shadow as Venus enters shadow. And then there's this Venus retrograde season covering the last third of 2018. This Venus retrograde season has certain key characteristics in it. One has to do with understanding how it is that we relate, what it is that we are projecting, and what we're getting back in return as a result. But the other part of this energy, and this season in particular, has to do with digging deep, often facilitated by some very surprising moments that may be sometimes delightful, but sometimes shocking. But they will ultimately lead us to ourselves and lead us to a greater maturity where it comes to matters of love across the board. Now, of course, Venus is goddess of love. And when there is a Venus retrograde season, it does tend to bring love into focus. And romantic love is part of the characteristic of this Venus retrograde season. Some of this Venus retrograde season will be spent with Venus in the sign of Libra. Now, this is her home sign, or one of her home signs, and it has to do with one-on-one interactions. It has to do with partnerships and alliances. It has to do with bouncing ideas off of others and looking at what you're getting back based on what it is that you are giving, whether that's nonverbal cues, whether that's the language that you're using, whether that is how you are expressing yourself, what is being returned to you as a result. And then there's Venus in Scorpio. And that's the digging deep part. And that is also where Venus starts to get really active in the sky, making several connections with Uranus and also speaking with Saturn in harmony. It's that Saturn bit that tells me that there's a lot to be gained here. Maturity and decisions made that will impact us positively into the future for a long time to come. One thing is for sure though, this Venus retrograde season is one that not a lot of us are going to forget very readily. It's going to be the kind of season that many of us look back on, reflect back on for a long time to come. So let's look at Venus retrograde in general. So Venus retrograde, the number one question she always asks is, do you love it? Do you love this person, place, thing, situation? Is there love here for you? And if that answer is yes, then this is going to be a time that proves that to you. It solidifies that bond. But if that answer is no, then this is where you start to realize that. You start to admit that to yourself, and you're able to make the changes you need to move yourself towards greater love. Now, sometimes that means working within a current situation. Sometimes that means going a new way. But whatever those moments of insight are going to be for you, those moments of revelation that are going to be for you, they will point the way to your truth and your unique truth, but also they will point the way towards how to create that change that you are desiring. So Venus retrograde season officially starts September 3rd, but Venus won't actually go retrograde until a month later, right around October 4. Now, I'm not too big on giving exact dates for a few reasons, but you know, friends and fans like yourself, that you ask me for it, so I'm going to try to remember to give them to you. The thing is that depending on where you are on the planet, you want to give or take a day on either side. And also, if you are a particularly sensitive person, you're aware of energies as they're coming up, then it's also going to be that you may feel some of these energies coming a little bit before. So you want to think of it as more of a time frame. Having said that, yeah, around September 3rd is when Venus goes into shadow. And during those first 5 days while she is in shadow, and what that means is essentially this is where she is going to come back to. It is the shadow that starts a pathway. You can imagine it as a sidewalk on walking down a block. Okay, so you're walking down a block and then you come to the shadow period, which means that you continue walking, but then once the retrograde happens, you're going to go back over the same path that the shadow period represented while Venus is retrograde. And then once Venus goes direct, she's going to go forward on that same path as well. So this is essentially a pathway in the sky and in our sky, in our charts, that Venus is going to walk over 3 times. The first time she walks over it, it's kind of like this is where the issues start to arise, the feelings start to come up. Sometimes they're a little bit subtle. Venus moving through Libra isn't necessarily very overly dramatic. However, it is once the retrograde comes around that we realize that what is happening now is in some way hearkening to what took place back when Venus was exactly here during the shadow period. And then it is the final direct shadow that ultimately is the resolution, that you feel like you finally have the answers and things are a lot more clearer than you realized before. And so because this is a place that you're going to have to take another look at and then a final look at, it's generally not the best time to be thinking about brand new endeavors in general, but particularly Venus related endeavors. You don't want to feel like you're, just doing brand new stuff like major changes on a physical level, whether it's cosmetic procedures, tattoos. These things certainly you want to try not to do anything too permanent. One thing that Venus retrograde is famous for is changing your style a little bit, but it just actually ends up being quite temporary. And so it is also not the time to be, really buying a new wardrobe in a style that is not of your normal choosing, or making, drastic changes to your haircut or things like that. Things will look a little bit different and you will want something different. Chances are your idea of what is beautiful is going to start to look different once we get further into this Venus retrograde season. I'll come back to the whole, fashion beauty part of this a little bit later in this video, because I got some things to say about that. That's going to be quite interesting to talk about. But bringing it back to right now and bringing it back to Venus in Libra. In general, this is about how it is that you're communicating, how you're expressing yourself, what you're attracting as a result. It's important to watch what is happening during the first 5 days of this Venus retrograde season, from September 3rd right to about September 8th, because it is this time frame that is going to be so important. This is where Venus, once she goes retrograde, like in October she goes retro, in November, while retrograde, she's going to come back to where she was in the first 5 days of this larger Venus retrograde season. And she's just going to be hanging out here for a whole month, all of November. And it is right in the middle, right around the 16th of November, that Venus will officially go direct. And then it will be, as we are at the very end of November, starting December, that Venus will move back into the sign of Scorpio, which is the other sign that she is spending a whole lot of time in as part of this retrograde season. Now, Venus in Scorpio is different than Venus in Libra. So you can think about the planets as a part of our soul. And then the sign is sort of like a coat that part may wear. It's the most natural expression of that part of our soul. And when it is that it's happening for us as a collective, like where the planet is now, we are exploring as a collective Venusian energy, this energy of love, this energy of prosperity, this energy of beauty. We are exploring it together in alignment with these two different areas, the sign of Libra and what it represents, including one-on-one alliances, including diplomacy as well. Libra as a sign tends to be very gracious. It has very good manners. And so this is going to be something that we are talking about as well as a collective. It is Venus in Scorpio that is a little bit different, whereas Venus in Libra is in its home sign, so it's able to bring forward qualities of itself that it likes much easier. You can imagine that, if there's a part of the soul, or let's say if you're wearing a coat that feels really easy and feels right, you walk differently and you feel differently than when you're wearing a coat that isn't as comfortable, that doesn't necessarily feel like you're able to just flow and be yourself. Well, that's kind of how Venus is in the sign of Scorpio. And it's likely because the sign of Scorpio, its ancient ruler is Mars. And you often see Venus and Mars sort of as a contrast in mythology in particular. We see these as sort of opposite spectrums of a similar energy or the same energy, whereas Mars is very much about the self and self-knowledge. Venus is very much about considering the other perspective and considering also how it is that you are interacting with others. It's not so much just oriented on you as an individual. It's more interested in relationships and relating. So as Venus moves into the sign of Scorpio, where she's going to spend a lot of this Venus retrograde season as well, she first enters while in shadow into the sign of Scorpio on the 9th of September. And it is in those 5 days, from the 9th to the 14th, that she is going to make the first of a series of connections with Uranus and with Saturn. So it is ultimately these first 10 days of the Venus retrograde season that you really want to watch, because this is where things can come up that you are going to return to in some way. But Venus in Scorpio in general asks us to really move past the superficial, to be more honest with ourselves about what in our lives feels superficial, where it is that we have sort of bought into an illusion, bought into a dream, where it is that we have put resources and money behind something that ultimately, when you get down to it, might not even matter that much. And the sign of Scorpio also has to do with understanding wealth. And it is going to be this Venus retrograde season that for a whole lot of us is going to help us to understand wealth differently and to find definitions that ultimately are uniquely our own, because there are a lot of ways to understand wealth. It's not just about, the numbers showing up in your bank account. There are many ways of understanding wealth. There's spiritual wealth, emotional wealth, the wealth of support that you have, the wealth of love that you have in your life. These are all ways in which we can understand wealth also. But the thing is, this is a journey. It's not that the answers are going to come right away the first few days of this retrograde season and that's it. But in order to really get the lessons, sometimes we have to sort of go a little bit in different directions to really understand more deeply. And it is at this time, especially in this second 5-day period in the middle of September, that is going to invite all of us in at least one area of life to look at what we consider wealth and to look at where maybe it is that we might be doing a little bit of compensating or overcompensating. There has been a very interesting phenomenon taking place. I touched on it a little bit in a recent weekly video, and that has to do with beauty gurus, right? The beauty guru community right now, especially on YouTube. There's a lot right now being revealed about the nature of sponsorships and how it is, what it is that influencers do and how they make money. And especially beauty influencers. These are the people who are coming very much into focus right now. There's a lot going on in that world. If you are not aware, that's okay too. But I do feel that if you are someone who's been, hearing about this or in any way interested in that, I feel like it is ultimately Venus in Scorpio that's going to help us to get to a deeper understanding of what beauty is. And also a deeper understanding of where it is that these financial deals influence what it is that we consider beautiful, what beautifying products do we place value in, why do they have the certain value that they do? Like, why is it that a certain cream costs $3 and another cream that says it does the same thing costs $300 or even more? What is really going on there? And who is it that is in some way telling you that the $300 one is better or the $3 one is better? Who gains from you believing that? It can go to a very deep place, and this can, reach a level of trust that is really at the core of why I think so many people have become fascinated by what is going on with beauty gurus. Anytime someone puts up a response video, it immediately is getting hundreds of thousands of views or into the millions of views. And so in a way, it's great because a lot more people within that community are able to garner support, and they're able to gain more subscribers as a result of the exposure. But at the same time, I feel like we are about to go to a deeper layer of understanding as to our own understanding as to why we value what we do, and why is it that we've put so much trust or so much value in the opinion of certain people, and where is it that their opinion is to be trusted at face value, where is it that it hasn't always been ethical. There's going to be more things that are coming forward. I think that we project a lot of our own stuff onto other people. You know, I was thinking about this today. There's one beauty person in particular, and people are really sending a lot of hate her way and saying just awful things. And I was thinking to myself, you know, if someone's going to say that to, you know, another person behind a computer or whatever, they feel like they can express that more safely. Imagine what they're saying to themselves, right? That is where the more profound shift needs to happen. Because I do think that there are a lot of people out there who really do not value themselves very much at all. And so it becomes a lot easier to point a finger at another person and say, look how bad you are, look how bad you've been, you should, you know, whatever, all these horrible things that they say. And at the end of the day, anyone who would do that, who would say something like that, it is because on some level they have spoken to themselves in that way. You know, exactly as Venus went into shadow, a video was released, an interview on Channel 4 with Jamila Jamil, who is an actress on the show called The Good Place. And in this video, she is essentially inviting people to challenge their notions of beauty and to embrace a healthy sense of self-worth for exactly who you are, a sense of self-acceptance for exactly who you are. And it's been very powerful, whether it's just this, you know, 1 minute clip that's been going around on Instagram that has just really gone viral in the last few days. I'm recording this just a couple of days as Venus has recently entered shadow. And this video just seems to be everywhere. People are sharing it like crazy. But there's also an extended video of this as well, an entire 45-minute video that is also very enlightening. And it is about this exploration of what do we consider beautiful and why do we consider something to be beautiful and something to not be beautiful. And I think that this is the perfect conversation to be having as a collective as Venus enters shadow, because this is what we are going to dive into that much deeper once Venus enters Scorpio, to really understand the various and complex dynamics that go behind how you feel about yourself. And that can, you know, run very deep. It can run to early messages, childhood messages, but it can also be about, you know, how it is that we've taken on certain opinions and why we've taken them on, and particularly opinions about what is beautiful, and more importantly, what is beautiful about ourselves or what is not beautiful about ourselves, and who benefits from that, right? So this is part of the exploration of this video, and I think that it is very well timed according to the symbol. And so it'll be interesting to see how that exploration continues, especially as it relates to self-esteem, self-worth, and power dynamics, whether those power dynamics took place within a family setting, a childhood setting, or a relationship setting, or societal setting. This is something that we are going to be exploring as a collective. Now, where are you in that individual journey? Well, that's where that Uranus-Venus connection comes in. Because this to me is just being very surprised, having these moments of insight. For some people, it's going to be these moments that feel like an epiphany, that feel like all of a sudden they see things differently. They're understanding what they love and whom they love differently, but ultimately in ways that empower them. That's the Saturn connection that is saying there's self-respect to be gained here if you are willing to either do the inner work or you are willing to embrace what it is that you're feeling is pointing the way to your truth. So while Venus is in Scorpio, she will officially go retrograde right around the 4th of October. And it's really in those days leading up to Halloween that are going to be very active once again. We've got all kinds of celestial connections taking place at that time. We have got Venus speaking with Mars. Now, this is actually going to be important because Venus speaks to Mars just before it enters the sign of Scorpio back September 8th. So September 8th, Venus speaks to Mars, and then she speaks to Mars again in the days leading up to Halloween. The next time she speaks to Mars will be in November, but by that time it'll be a harmonious connection. And so what this tells me is there's going to be a lot of passion in the air as we approach Halloween. The other conversation that's going to be repeated is this Venus standing across from Uranus. So again, there's going to be lots of surprises around this time that ultimately lead to stability, that ultimately lead to Saturn, which is ultimately about being more grounded and knowing that there are things you can do to move yourself towards the future that you most desire. All of these ultimately great things, and all of these an opportunity on the one hand, yes, to let go of baggage that you don't need, let go of whether it's messaging, whether it's past hurt or past pain. That is something that Venus retrograde can be great at helping us do. It can help us to get another look at the past and ultimately to more fully resolve it, especially on energetic levels. And as we go to Halloween, and then right as we're entering November 1st, that is when Venus is going to move into the sign of Libra. So it is going to be right around the 16th of November that Venus officially goes direct. And as she moves towards the very end of November, as she's starting December, that is going to be when she makes her last connection with Uranus. And so again, this epiphany energy, but by then it is going to be that Venus is in its home sign again of Libra. So it's going to be a lot more about what other people are doing, like other people surprising you is going to be a much bigger factor. It's going to be less, less soul searching, which can actually be a great thing. But it's going to be much more about, how are particular dynamics, what is the truth behind particular relationships and dynamics that are playing out? And where is it now that we are ready to move beyond what seemed very pleasant or a certain way on the surface, but we're ready to move beyond that and understand what substance may actually be there or not be there. It may play out with another person or in some other area of life. If you stay tuned towards the very end, I have preview horoscopes up so you can watch the horoscope for your sign at the very end. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. So as we enter December, this Venus retrograde season starts to wrap up. Venus moves back into the sign of Scorpio, speaks with Saturn in harmony. And this is going to be the real coming together where we start to understand more about how we are now better off as a result of some of the love lessons that we very likely have gone through, some of the understandings of self, understandings and redefining of beauty and redefining of self-worth that we very likely have gone through in at least one area of life. And it is officially going to be the 18th of December that Venus is out of shadow. So of course, this can play out in romantic relationships. Now, here are some things to remember. Breakups that happen during a Venus retrograde tend to not stay broken up. And that is because what the heart wants will change. And so keep that in mind. I'm not saying stay in a situation that you don't want to, but I am saying that this can be more a time of gathering experience. And then once we get you into December, knowing what the right choice is for you. A certain situation, if it pops up in September in particular, might look very different once we get into December and we've already been on this journey, this exploration of love and heart. For those of you who do meet someone new at this time, what tends to happen is what you get is not what you think it is in the beginning. Now that can actually work out to be good, okay? With that Saturn connection, I'm very hopeful that there are going to be people who feel like they've connected with someone where there is real long-term potential. But just be aware that this can really bring about some twists and turns that you weren't expecting, some surprises that maybe you weren't expecting as well. But ultimately, it is the awarenesses that you have that will allow you to make more grounded choices that fill you with a sense of self-respect, which is a big blessing of this larger Venus retrograde season. Sometimes it's not a bad thing, right? Like the surprise that comes. It might end up being something that isn't even that big a deal to you. Like the person ends up being a very different age bracket than you thought. They're much older than you realized or younger than you realized. They might be a different income bracket. That is very possible with this energy because of that Venus moving into Scorpio. So they might be like much richer than you thought or not as monetarily rich as you had believed. These are the types of things that can happen, but it doesn't have to mean that it's a deal breaker. And it isn't necessarily that whatever it is that was not understood at first glance is necessarily of a deceitful energy. And so a lot is going to depend on your unique circumstance, of course, and also what feels right to you. If this is information that you're getting, if it is for you not okay, or if it is something that you can work with that isn't a big deal. These are also situations that can happen. At the very least, it'll give you some good stories. That I can promise you. If you meet anybody during a Venus retrograde season, there will be some memorable stories there. And I'll also say this, if you meet anybody in those first days of this retrograde season, in the first 2 weeks of September in particular, and they come back around a little bit later on as part of this season, as you move further into the year, well, that tells you something as well about where it is that there's even more to know about this person. So especially in the first days of this season, like you could, have meet somebody, it can seem very casual on the surface. Just wait, like what happens a little bit later in this retrograde season, you will be coming back around to what was actually started in September. Now, a couple of more thoughts I wanted to share about this Venus retrograde season. A big part of what this season has to do with is, of course, love, and the love that we share with others. And what does that mean to us? And yes, it can be romantic love, but there are so many different types of love. Particularly, I think about the ancient Greeks who had all kinds of different words for the different types of love that there were. But as I look at this sky, there's a sense now that we are on a journey of defining love differently and learning to love more deeply than we did before. And that is something that absolutely can be embraced. When Venus retrograde season occurs, it is also one of those things that past loves come back into the picture, or in some way we are reminded of them, or we reconnect with them, or we hear something about them. And that is ultimately so that we can get that other look and so that we can get that closure. But this also allows us a time in some ways to reinvent ourselves or to consider our past reinventions. So why am I saying this? Well, look, I want to share with you an observation that I have had. And, I am very accepting of people's journeys. Let me just say that at first. People deserve to do whatever it is that makes them feel beautiful, like absolutely beautiful, and they should do that. I have seen, though, with Venus retrograde season, people making some choices that are, whether permanent or kind of almost permanent, right? That maybe are not that great choices for a variety of reasons. And so I would want to caution you on that. Now, I'll use this as an example, and I do so reluctantly because I do think that she's absolutely fabulous. Let me say that. Katy Perry, I'll use as an example. The last Venus retrograde season, she dramatically changed her haircut and her hairstyle, dramatically. And it felt after that point that the energy that she was getting, the perception of her, it wasn't the same. It seemed like she was on a different energy, or just embraced differently in a way that hasn't been the case so much since the last Venus retrograde season, when she, again, there was a drastic change to her hairstyle. And with this Venus retrograde season, if she was my client at this time, I would say to her, consider going back to your hairstyle as it was before. That is a good way to use this energy. In fact, it's a great way, just as an experiment. Doesn't have to be anything too permanent. Of course, we know there are lots of ways to make your hair look a certain way for a particular event or whatever. And I would invite her to experiment with that, because I do feel that this whole reinvention was rooted in a time that had the Venus retrograde season. And if you're an artist of any kind, Venus is your guardian, deity, basically. She is somebody who's part of the blessings that come into your life. In fact, artists, musicians, really any kind of creative people, you tend to see a very strong Venus, especially for musicians. And so if you are someone who is a creative person, you're in the performing arts, you're in music, then it becomes that much more important to consider how you're going to use this Venus retrograde season. Another thing to consider is back in March and April of 2016. So we're looking at over a year ago. That was the last time Venus was retrograde. And it was during that retrograde season that Venus was in the sign, part of the time, in the sign of Aries. Now that is the opposite sign of Libra, which means that in some way there is a sense that you are going in a different direction, that you are going in a more balanced direction than you have known before, where it comes to love and expression and beauty in particular. And so if you are also one of those people who made some big changes in the early part of 2016, whether it was to your look in particular, to what you consider beautiful, you started to tap into a different expression of beauty, which is part of Venus, or a different creative expression, then it can be this time that helps you to find a balance between what was before the last Venus retrograde season, so what was going on in 2014, 2015, and what happened in 2016. Well, finding a balance between those two visions, those two expressions, is a great part of how this Venus retrograde season can actually be utilized. And that is really for all of us. One more thing I will add, if you've been watching me for a while, you know that there are times I like to say it's just hair. And what I mean by that is, if you've been watching me for a while, I have gone through a whole lot of hair colors. I really enjoy expressing myself in that way. And, to me, it's like the hair grows again or whatever. It's not a big deal. Enjoy your life. And yes, that is a great philosophy to have. But then sometimes it's not just hair, right? Sometimes it is that you change your hair and it dramatically changes the expression that you are putting into the world. And that can be wonderful and empowering, but that can also be something that can be limiting as well. And sometimes when Venus is retrograde, we don't realize how the choices that we're making actually may not bring to fruition all that we are expecting, or we might have different expectations. And along those same lines, any kind of physical changes, especially cosmetic procedures or tattoos, I would strongly advise during Venus retrograde to not go in that direction. Retrograde season in general as well. Don't pursue any kind of like a major physical alterations, because look, on the one hand, with the retrograde season, it's like you'll have to do it again. There'll be more stuff that has to be refined or unexpected ways in which things will develop that you hadn't expected, certain outcomes that you hadn't expected. So these are some things that you just have to be mindful of with Venus retrograde season. Ultimately, if you want to make some sort of a change physically, that's great. It's your body, it's your self-expression. You do what makes you happy, nothing wrong with that. But ideally, you want to have a strong Venus on your side, because she is an expression of beauty. If you are looking for a beautiful result in any area, right? Whether that's, again, new wardrobe, new types of facials, or anything that you may do to beautify yourself and move towards a definition of beauty that is right for you. If you're doing something external, that's where you really want to hold back during a Venus retrograde season. But Venus retrograde is a great time to go back to doing something that you were doing before that gave you pleasure, that made you feel beautiful. And it's also a great time to go to an inner level and to consider inner beauty and how that is shining forward. And, I want to respect, people have all kinds of ways of expressing beauty. Some are very external, some are more balanced, or some are more focused on the internal beauty. And ideally, in our world, we would understand that it's okay to play with the illusion, which is our physical bodies, but there's nothing like inner beauty. There's nothing like knowing that your soul is beautiful. And it is that soul, it is that inner work that is where the power is during a Venus retrograde season. I want to mention marriage. I want to talk about marriage because, in general, Venus retrograde season, not the best time to get married or be, romantic vows of sorts. Generally not the best time. Now, I know sometimes, people, they've already made their plans, they've put down deposits or whatever, and they're like, look, I'm going through with this, I'm doing this. And that's fine if that's what feels right for you. Then ultimately, I do think that when we feel very called in a particular direction, regardless of what an astrologer may say, it's ultimately because there is some karmic unfolding that needs to happen in that moment. And so people will accept whatever the chart is. And the thing is also, when you get married, there is something called the marriage chart. And that is the moment that you are pronounced husband and wife, or husband and husband, or wife and wife. And so I have had people reach out to me and ask me to do a marriage chart for them, like my established clientele, which I, have done a few over the years. And the thing is that that chart, on the one hand, you can never get an absolutely perfect chart. It's incredibly rare to have a very perfect chart. And there is this whole other a branch about astrology called electional astrology, which is basically the astrology of choosing the best day. And that includes the best wedding day. And there are other factors to consider. You want to have a well-placed moon, for example. You want to have a well-placed sun, ideally sun speaking to moon. Now there's these whole rules and all these different ways of approaching a marriage chart. You can learn more about that as well. I don't know, I might have done a video about that at some point because I've done a lot of FAQs, but if not, there's lots of information out there about this. And so the thing is that when Venus is retrograde, because Venus rules love, and in some way also because she rules partnerships, and that is matrimony is ultimately a partnership that you are coming into. That has legal implications, profound legal implications at that. Is why Venus is so important where it comes to looking at a wedding and making sure that you have a strong Venus. You want the love to be strong. You want the love to grow. So what does a strongly placed Venus mean? Well, on the one hand, a Venus that's not in shadow or not retrograde, think about it. You want the goddess of love to be strong so that the love is strong. You want the goddess of love full steam forward so that the love grows forward. And so what can happen is, with Venus retrograde season represents a change of heart or another look at a particular situation. And that's one way that this can work out. But there are other ways that actually can be kind of comical. I'll give you one example. I actually know somebody, and before she was an astrologer, she got married to somebody, found out after the fact that it was during a Venus retrograde season. But anyways, I remember her telling me all this other stuff was happening in her chart. Some 25 years later, 28 years later, I think it was a full Saturn cycle when it happened. But she said that the ex-wife of her husband contacted them and said that she was wanting to get married and found out that they were still legally married. The husband was still legally married to someone else, which meant that their marriage, even though they'd lived together for 30 years by that point, was not a legal marriage because of this technicality. And it was, it was a big joke. It wasn't that big a deal. Everybody had a good laugh about it, and it gave them a chance to, renew their vows and do it all over again and do it right. And so it's made for this very comical story. But that's one way also. We're all laughing because it is so Venus retrograde. It is just so incredible the ways in which these symbols can play out in ways that sometimes you don't anticipate. So if you have a choice, then it's best not to schedule a wedding around Venus retrograde season. If you don't have a choice, then you do what it is that feels like the karmic path laid before you. On a side note, because I've talked about Mars retrograde season as well from time to time, you also want to have a strong Mars. As Venus is entering shadow, Mars is going direct, still in shadow. And it is going to be in October that Mars will leave shadow and be fully going forward. So that is good news in a sense as well. But ultimately, in a marriage chart, Mars represents power dynamics between two people. And so in general, you find that people who get married under a Mars retrograde or Mars retrograde season might find that the power dynamic goes through a change. Sometimes that can be financial or otherwise, but what it starts out as is the person who has the more power, the person who's the more leader, it can end up going to the other person or going the other way. So these are some ways in which to consider a marriage chart. I was recently asked about this by somebody who was interested in going through a civil union. So they said, okay, I don't want to get married, but look, I'll do a civil union. So that way we can avoid this and it doesn't matter if Venus is retrograde. And I was saying to her, I'm sorry, but it still matters because ultimately it is 7th house. It is Venus that has to do with partnerships of all kinds. And so if you are somebody who's looking to get into a business partnership, a business alliance, it's a good idea to avoid Venus retrograde season before you are really signing those papers and making those agreements, especially if it's something that you hope will continue well into the future. If it's like a short-term thing, you're just hiring somebody, then it's not as big a deal. For something like that, you want to have a strong Mercury. I want to start wrapping up my Venus retrograde video by telling you a little story about something that I experienced as part of Venus retrograde season. This was before I went to astrology full time. It was just right at the beginning when people started offering to pay me for readings. So this was quite a few years ago. And I remember there was a Venus retrograde season. And you know, if you've been watching me for a while, I think that's the 3rd or 4th time I've said this in this video, but I really don't often wear yellow. It's just not my thing. It's just not my color for whatever reason. I just never really felt very aligned with yellow. There's lots of colors that I do like. I have nothing against that color, but think back years ago, a much younger Nadiya. And at that time, I only wore black. Like I loved wearing black. I was always everything head to toe. That was my thing. That was a phase I was in. And we entered Venus retrograde season, and particularly when Venus went retrograde, I really started liking yellow. I loved yellow. And I remember I was working at a call center at the time, and I was literally like just spending all my money to amass a yellow wardrobe. And I'm talking monochrome, head to toe, with the shirt and the cardigan and the pants. I mean, this is in Canada, so the weather is kind of cool, you know, especially during the colder months. So there would be layers of yellow going on. And that was so my thing, that Venus retrograde season. And I remember one day I sort of, you know, was finding myself sort of going towards my standard black outfits again. And I had this moment one day where I was like, why did I buy this stuff? Like, what was going on with me? Why did I decide all of a sudden that I was going to wear nothing but yellow? Like, what was going on there? Anyways, I ended up giving all that yellow stuff away. It just was not going to be worn again. And that was a huge lesson for me. That was a great learning opportunity to be able to look at the sky and go, you know, why did this happen? What went on? And to realize and to connect it to Venus retrograde season. It was so valuable just for that lesson to realize that, especially if you find yourself wanting to go in a whole other direction in terms of what expresses your style, in terms of what you consider beautiful, especially if it's something that you're not normally into or that you haven't really done before, something that might be an investment in particular. Now, whether that is, you know, just thrift store bargains, whether that is luxury brands, regardless, you would be amazed at how you feel called towards something really different. And then that Venus goes direct and you go, what was I thinking? That can happen with Venus retrograde because I know that because it happened to me. What I love about this Venus retrograde season, well, look, ultimately what I love about it is that it helps us to get to a deeper understanding of love and what love is for us. It is this deeper appreciation of love and tapping into it that helps us to actually be more loving in the world and to know a deeper love than we did before. Now, that love isn't just about other people, although that can be one way that this plays out. How much are you going to actually love another honestly? How much love do you put into your work? Do you love what you do? Do you love how you take care of yourself, how you speak to yourself? Do you place a significant amount of self-value? But also, conversely, where is it that Your sense of self-value needs to be more grounded, not in terms of just your potential. Your potential is great, but what are you actually doing to demonstrate the self-value that you believe that you have? Where is it that you are interacting with others from a place of genuine love and a place of genuine self-love? Or where is it that there are, other things going on, whether it's fear, whether it's manipulation, and it can be really subtle. It can be the last thing you expect, but it can be quite amazing with Uranus standing across the sky from Venus, how we may very well have these epiphany moments right about now where we realize what our true motivations are and whether or not they are truly rooted in love. But ultimately, these epiphanies will lead us towards knowing love not only more deeply, but knowing love that grounds us, that roots us in the value of being genuinely and in practical ways more loving and more wise as well. Well, thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned right now. The previews are coming for each and every sign. So I will have the first minute, as I've done before with other special horoscopes, the first minute. And the first minute gives you a lot. But if you really want to deep dive into what this Venus retrograde season is going to mean for you, there are two ways to get that video. One is by being a superstar. Superstars get unlimited access to all the special horoscopes that I produce, and that is in the superstar space on the main navigation page for superstars. So that is there. Also on my website on nadiyashah.com. You can go onto my homepage and click on the link there, and that will take you towards purchasing a digital download. And so you can get instant access to the Venus retrograde special horoscopes. I hope that you absolutely love and enjoy them. And thank you. Let me just say a very heartfelt, love-felt thank you for your trust, for your amazing presence, and just for being a part of my spiritual journey and for your trust in my interpretation of the sky. It just really does mean so much to me. It means the world to me. I hope that all of us use this time to move towards greater love and a deeper love, a more honest love than we have known before. That would be an incredible use of this Venus retrograde season. So coming up right now, the horoscopes going in order, and it'll be a great season. Enjoy. Hello, fabulous superstar Aries. Welcome to your Venus retrograde special horoscope, looking at this upcoming season of early September right to mid-December of 2018. I am your astrologer, Nadiya Shah. Thank you for being here. What an amazing time it is, and what an amazing cycle it is. It is now that a whole lot of us are going to be experiencing lessons in love and lessons in understanding a deeper layer of love than we knew before. Venus retrograde season always asks us to consider, do I really love it? This person, place, thing, situation, this moment that I'm in my life. Am I bringing love to this moment or not? And can I bring love? Is there love here for me or not? And where it is that it feels like love is not there, we are willing to let it go. And you are one of the signs most likely to experience this energy in the context of partnerships, in the context of love. Hello, fabulous superstar Taurus. Welcome to your Venus retrograde special horoscope. Looking at the Venus retrograde season of 2018 from the beginning of September right to the middle of December. I am your astrologer, Nadiya Shah. Thank you for being here. What an amazing time it is, and what an amazing sky is it. We are going to be going through a powerful Venus retrograde season. It starts right around the 3rd of September, and it takes us right to the middle of December. Some turning moments that you are going to want to watch out for are happening very early on, and that is because much of this Venus retrograde season is going to be spent with Venus in your opposite sign. In fact, Venus is sort of going between two areas of the sky. One is very much about you, how you are living your life. Are you bringing love to all you do on a day-to-day basis? Do you love the work you're doing, the people who surround you there? Do you have a sense of Hello, Fabulous Superstar Gemini. Welcome to your horoscope for your Venus retrograde season special horoscope. Looking at this upcoming Venus retrograde season from early September right to mid-December 2018. I am your astrologer, Nadiya Shah. Thank you for being here. What an amazing time it is, and what an amazing transit it is as well. It is going to be Venus that is moving back and forth between two areas of your sky. Now, one part of the sky does have to do with love, but is very much about your experience in love. So it has to do with what your heart truly wants. It has to do with flirtation and romance. And if you feel that you truly are enjoying yourself where it comes to love. It also asks you, do you love your life? Do you feel like you are living a life where your heart leads the way? Are you feeling like you're using your passions and your creativity to the fullest? And where is it that you are ready to create more? Hello, Fabulous Superstar Cancer. Welcome to your horoscope. Looking at the Venus retrograde season of 2018 from the beginning of September right to the middle of December. I am your astrologer, Nadiya Shah. Thank you for being here. What an amazing time it is, and what an amazing transit it is. Part of this Venus retrograde season is going to be spent at home and understanding your past and the love that has been there and the love that you have now. As part of that, you are one of the signs most likely to reconnect with somebody from your past, and someone that you knew way before may in some way come back around for further understanding and even further closure. And the other part of this cycle that is coming up is going to be spent in a very romantic part of your sky, a part of the sky that has to do with flirtation and romance and what your heart really wants. But that extends to beyond love. Yes, it has to do with love. And Hello, Fabulous Superstar Leo. Welcome to your horoscope. Looking at the Venus retrograde season of 2018 from the beginning of September right to the middle of December. I am your astrologer, Nadiya Shah. Thank you for being here. What an amazing time it is, and what an amazing adventure you're about to go on. But this adventure is going to be very much of self. It's going to be very much of looking at yourself and the way that you perceive things, the way that you communicate, and as well as looking more deeply at the past and transforming it, forgiving it. Ultimately, Venus retrograde season asks us, do you love it? Do you love this person, place, thing, or situation? And if you don't, if you truly, honestly come to that answer where you know that that is not love for you, well, you are more willing to transform. You're willing to make the changes. It is an authentic love that we want, and that sense of authenticity is a very strong theme for a lot of us. Hello, Fabulous Superstar Virgo. Welcome to your Venus retrograde special horoscope, looking at the Venus retrograde season of 2018 from the beginning of September right to the middle of December. I am your astrologer, Nadiya Shah. Thank you for being here. What an amazing time it is, and what an amazing transit it is. This is going to be one very important Venus retrograde season for a few reasons. There is a real sense here of redefining love, of feeling more aware, of having important conversations, perhaps very spontaneously, of connecting with the least likely people you thought you would, and at the same time realizing and clarifying what really matters where it comes to love. Venus retrograde season ultimately asks ourselves, do I love it? Do I love this person, place, or thing, or situation? Is this the direction in which I want to? Hello, Fabulous Superstar Libra. Welcome to your Venus retrograde season special horoscope, looking at the Venus retrograde season of 2018 from the beginning of September right to the middle of December. I am your astrologer, Nadiya Shah. Thank you for being here. What an amazing time it is. And I don't say this lightly. This is really going to be one of those times that you will look back on for a very long time to come and realize how much you learned about yourself, how much changed for you, and ultimately changed for the better. In fact, before the season is even over, you are going to start to see the benefits of what can otherwise feel like a little bit of a roller coaster. Now, ultimately, with Venus retrograde season partly in your sign, partly in the sign just after yours, This is going to be a time when you are getting more clear about people, places, things, situation, and whether or not there is. Hello, fabulous superstar Scorpio. Welcome to your Venus retrograde season special horoscope, looking at the upcoming Venus retrograde season from September 3rd right to December 18th, 2018. I am your astrologer, Nadiya Shah. Thank you for being here. What an amazing time it is, and what an amazing transit it is as well. We have a powerful sky, especially for you, and a time that is going to stand out for you, not only as you get to the end of the year, but when you look back at the trajectory of your life, and I don't say that lightly, you will realize how important this last third of 2018 ended up being for you. There are valuable lessons here to be had about yourself and about who you are, and especially who you are when you're engaging other people in the prospect of love. And there are valuable understandings here as you dig deeper, as you have the... Hello, fabulous superstar Sagittarius. Welcome to your Venus retrograde season special horoscope, looking at the Venus retrograde season of 2018 from September 3rd right to December 18. I am your astrologer, Nadiya Shah. Thank you for being here. What an amazing transit it is. What an amazing time it is. Venus retrograde season is an opportunity for all of us to start looking within and to ask ourselves the most important question that Venus asks, which is, do I love it? Do I love this person, place, thing, situation? Is my heart here? Do I feel like I could magnify the love? And do I love myself for being in this situation? These are powerful questions, and it is this season that not only will we all be digging deep for these answers, but you in particular, this is work that on one hand you are ready to do. This is karmic. Hello, fabulous superstar Capricorn. Welcome to your Venus retrograde season special horoscope, looking at the Venus retrograde season of 2018 right from September 3rd to December 18. I am your astrologer, Nadiya Shah. Thank you for being here. What an amazing time it is, and what an amazing transit it is. This is going to be a time when a whole lot of us out there are going to be asking ourselves, do I love it? Do I love this person, place, thing, situation in my life? And where it is that the answer is no, we're more willing to make a change. But where it is that the answer is yes, and a lot of us might be surprised to realize the depth of the love that we actually feel, well, this is where we commit that much more deeply. You know a little something as of late about knowing yourself and living from a more authentic place within you. Now, Mars will be in your sign. Hello, fabulous superstar Aquarius. Welcome to your Venus retrograde special horoscope, looking at this upcoming Venus retrograde season from September 3rd right to December 18, 2018. I am your astrologer, Nadiya Shah. Thank you for being here. What an amazing time it is, and what an amazing transit it is. This is going to represent a powerful time for you as you embark on a journey towards uncovering your destiny and feeling like it's being revealed in surprise moments and leap forward moments for you at that. At the same time, we have got this beautiful air energy playing out, as well as part of this Venus retrograde season will be spent with Venus at home in fellow air sign Libra, which tells me that you will be thinking very far and wide, whether that's in terms of ideas, whether that's in terms of places. Hello, fabulous superstar Pisces. Welcome to your Venus retrograde special horoscope, looking at the Venus retrograde season of 2018 from September 3rd right to December 18. I am your astrologer, Nadiya Shah. Thank you for being here. What an amazing time it is, and what an amazing transit it is. You know, they say Venus is exalted in your sign, and what that means is your sign has a special relationship with Venus, a special connection with Venus. It's like your sign is able to appreciate how important a symbol she actually is. And she's able to bring forward her very best when interacting with the sign of Pisces. So yes, this Venus retrograde season is not going to be in your sign, and that's probably a really good thing. But this Venus retrograde season is going to be taking place, in part at least, in fellow water sign Scorpio, which is a part of the sky that has to do with the big vision. It has to do with your place in the world and being enthusiastic.